Thanks for checking out Scotty's Hobbies. Today I'm going to show you how to replace the pads and rotors on this Dodge Dakota. I'm using power stop brake pads and rotors, but you could use any brake pads and rotors that you choose. Just make sure you get a nice kit that's got rotors, good pads, ceramic pads preferably, and a hardware kit. Throughout this video, I'm going to show you everything you need to get this job done, what tools you're going to need, give you the proper torque specifications, and give you some tips as I go. If you have any questions about your brake job, make sure you comment below, ask away. You can text me, and I'll do my best to get back to you as soon as I can. And this job will be the same on a lot of other vehicles. The brake specifications or the torque specifications might be a little bit different on your vehicle, but pretty much most brakes on the front, if they're a floating rotor, are going to be the same. My shop right now is a mess. We are just moving into this new area. It's going to be amazing when we're all said and done, but I got jobs lined up that I have to get going and I have to get them back on the road. So this is going to be front brake pads and rotors, Dodge Dakota. There's going to be a few other videos coming out pertaining to this vehicle, doing some other maintenance work to it. So make sure you stay tuned, like, subscribe, and share. Make sure you hit that like button. That helps out a ton lately. So like, please. And here we go. This will be a quick process. If you do this job in your garage at home after you watch this video, it should take you about an hour and a half if you have all the tools and parts gathered together when you get going. This should be really quick. Now let's get going on this quick BJ. Now you can see we have the brake rotor, actually the wheel, everything turned to the right, so it's easier to access the caliper itself. We're going to remove the caliper and then the bracket, so let's go ahead and take a look. Now we're going to remove the caliper to bracket bolts. These are going to be 14 millimeter, preferably a 6-point, and I'm using a 3/8 wrench. Now after we remove the caliper, on the back side we're going to remove the caliper bracket bolts, both of them, and those are going to be a 21 millimeter, and I'm going to use a 1/2 inch socket wrench to loosen them up. Now using the 3/8 and 14 millimeter, we're just going to loosen them up, make sure that everything loosens up nice and easy. If we get to a point to where we need to get more parts, such as an actual caliper itself, it'd be good to know right about now. But everything's loosened up. If you have a problem taking this caliper off of the actual brake pads, let's see here, you might have to grab like a flathead or a pry bar or something and compress the piston into, or the pistons into the caliper a little bit. But let's see if we run into that problem. So 3/8, 14 millimeter. Did I tell you enough times? Yeah, see, a little bit hard to pivot up. And that's because on the back side of these pads, there's these little, hopefully you can see it right there, these little ears or tabs. And they're also on the back side pads too. So they're a little bit hard to get off. And that's what I mean. Using a pry bar or a flathead screwdriver, you could just push the pistons in. Where's it? It's kind of hard to grip this one. Push the pistons in just a tad bit, and that makes it easier for the caliper to slide off. Usually. Not enough. Nice. And this one, both of these, this one needs a new caliper. Go figure. So we're going to end up replacing the caliper on this one as well. But for this video, we're just going to do the pads and rotors. I'll make another video of replacing the actual caliper momentarily. So keep focused on just doing this job. Remove your brake pads. When you do remove the brake pads, make sure you take note, I should say, of where the pad was located. So there's no wear indicator on this pad. There is one on the inboard pad. You can see right here, there's a wear indicator. So you make sure when you put these back together, you do the same thing or put them back in the same fashion that you removed them. Now, one thing I did forget, this caliper is fine up here. It's obviously not hanging by the hose or anything, but they do have these little S hooks, and this will hold the caliper up. To use these, hook it on your caliper, and just hook it on to pretty much anything you can find to hook it on, like so. And that just holds the caliper up so you don't have the caliper hanging from the hose and causing any damage or causing this to bend or anything. So make sure that's up there, make sure that's well supported, and continue with your job. Another tip that I'm going to give you that I like to do. With the rotor on here, it's a little bit easier if you put one lug nut on. This will keep the rotor from moving around. Just makes it so you don't put any pressure on your caliper bracket. It just makes it easier. And when you're reinstalling everything, I always recommend to put a lug nut on as well, just to hold the rotor in place so nothing is moving around. Just makes it a lot easier to line everything up. To remove these two bolts on the inside for the caliper bracket to the knuckle assembly, these are going to be 21 millimeter. I'm going to use the 1/2 inch drive or the 1/2 inch socket wrench to get these off. So right here, 6-point, 21 millimeter, 1/2 inch socket wrench. You might use a breaker bar to get this off. Might make it a little bit easier for you. Actually, we'll do that. Get some extra leverage. Like so. And get the top one loose. You could use a power tools if you have them. I sometimes will use my Milwaukee tools to do this job, but I do my best to do the brake jobs using the tools that everybody has at their disposal at home. If you need any tools or mechanic tool set, make sure you look for a link in the description below to purchase one. When we're tightening everything up, I will provide you with the torque specifications, so make sure you stay tuned. And while you're watching this video, again, make sure you like, tell everybody about Scotty's Hobbies, subscribe, do all that good stuff for me, but hit that like button, please. The rotor will come right off when you take the lug nut off. You're pretty much halfway done with the brake job. This brake job would take you about 45 minutes per side at home, after you have all this knowledge and your tools and your parts sitting aside. At this point, I would usually use this tool on my my Milwaukee gun, and I would clean off the hub assembly. But this is too big for this hub assembly, and it rubs on it, and I can't get all the way down to the hub. So what I'm going to do to use it is just go in between, and then I'm going to use a wire brush to get the rest. Before you install your new rotor, you want to make sure that this surface is nice and clean. You don't want any burrs or unevenness on your hub. So usually this tool would go over the lug nuts, but in this case, this doesn't have proper clearance on the inner of the hub assembly, so it rubs and it doesn't work. What I'm going to do is use this to clean between the lug nuts and then use a wire brush to get the rest. Obviously, the cleaner the better. So nice and even, nice and smooth, I should say. Sometimes some people like to use some anti-seize on the surface right here between this and the rotor. If you want to do that, go ahead and do so. I personally do not do that, and maybe in the future I might. I'm not quite sure yet. Let's go ahead and put the new rotor on. New rotor. I'm going to use one lug nut to hold the rotor in place while we assemble everything, and that's just to hold it in place. Obviously we're going to take it off and put the wheel back on. Perfect. With this old caliper, before you install your old caliper, you need to take a look at it and make sure everything is all good. I'm going to show you on this one, it is not. So we're going to replace the caliper, but stay with me. If you're going to just put the pads back on, use the old stuff, just continue this process. After this video gets uploaded, edited, all that good stuff, I'm going to make a video of bleeding out the brake system after you install a new caliper, if you need to do so. So we're going to go ahead and install the new caliper. The brake line is not going to be hooked up during this video, but yours obviously will. Just kind of ignore that if you can. And again, if you end up replacing the caliper, make sure you stay tuned, check out the other videos, and check that video out as well. If this video is helping you out so far, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and share to everybody, please. The caliper was up here being held with the S-hook, so it wasn't just hanging on the brake line. And what I did notice when I was doing this brakes or taking them apart, look at these boots. These boots are completely torn, they're ripped up, they're no good. You can see there's a little bit of just gunk and stuff built up on the bottom. That could be because these were leaking at one point in time, but I would not reuse this one, and make sure you replace it with a good new one, or a good used one I should say. So let's see what I have. We're going to install the caliper bracket first. Let me get you a good view. Caliper bracket. Now usually before I would install the caliper bracket, I would make sure that your slider pins move in and out nice and freely. These ones are kind of hard actually for it being brand new. Like, that is real easy. That's the way they should be. Why is this one not like that? I'll slap some more lube in this thing. I do like this brake lubricant, the ceramic lubricant I should say. Seems to work out pretty good for me. You don't need too much of it on these. A little lube goes a long way. I like that much better. When we do install your new bracket, we are going to install new hardware, or even if you're going to install the old bracket I should say, you're going to use the new hardware that came with your brake pads. New bracket or old bracket, whichever one you're using. Now these bracket, sorry. Now these bolts that go from the knuckle into the bracket, these are going to be torqued down to 148 foot-pounds. That's a lot of foot-pounds when I'm barely 148 pounds. Just kidding. I'm pretty light, but not that light. Alright, so we're going to use a 1/2-inch torque wrench, and we're going to torque these 21mm bolts to the bracket to 148 foot-pounds. Perfect. Now the caliper to bracket bolts are going to be 32 foot-pounds when we get there. But first, let's install the new hardware. When installing the new hardware, something to take note is that this right here is pushed all the way up into the caliper. The bracket. So you don't have any rubbing on the rotor itself. Make sure it's not rubbing on either side. We're going to do the same with the top. Just make sure it's pushed all the way up there. Now I usually don't use lube where the pads slide in the caliper, but on this one, the OEM or the brake manufacturer recommends that we do use lube on where the pads slide in the caliper. So I'm just putting a little bit of lube, not a lot. The reason why I don't usually like using lube is because I believe dust collects on the lube and it might stop the pads from freely moving. When we install the new pads, make sure you take note of where your wear indicator is at. You want to make sure the wear indicator is placed in the same location that you removed it. Perfect. Try not to touch the pads so you don't get any grease on them. Oh. And try not to touch the rotor so you don't get any grease on the rotor. Alright, perfect. Now we would at this time bring the caliper over and install it onto the bracket, but we're using the new caliper. We're going to go ahead and install it over the brake pads. Before we do that, the manufacturer does recommend that we put lube on the back of these brake pads, so we are going to do so. The pistons are going to meet around these little ears, or divots, or whatever you want to call them. And then on this side, caliper is going to meet right there, right in the center, and on the side. The lube, a lot of lube goes, sorry, not a lot of lube, a little lube goes a long ways. Now let's pretend that you were going to just install this caliper onto your new pads. So you're going to reuse the old caliper. In this case, what you need to do is push these pistons back into the caliper. How do you do that, you ask? You want to loosen the cap on the brake fluid reservoir, so when you push the fluid or push the pistons back into the caliper, the fluid has somewhere to escape. I feel like if the cap is on there nice and tight, you might cause a leak somewhere, or you might blow a seal out somewhere. It's unlikely, but hey, it might be possible. So that's why I just take that cap off, just leave it right there, so if any fluid comes out, it easily escapes. Before you get done with the brake job, make sure you tighten that cap back up so it doesn't fall off while you're driving down the road. With the cap off, you still will have braking power, but you don't want to get dust and just dirt and crap inside the reservoir right there. So make sure you tighten that back up before you get the job done. Get an old pad, put it in the caliper. I'm using this caliper compression tool. You could use one of these on each side, just go back and forth. It's a little bit harder for you, but it does do the job if that's what you have. I personally like this compression tool. I used this tool on the other side and it worked just fine. Now in the beginning of the video, we opened up the reservoir cap. That's because at this time when we push these pistons back into this caliper, you're going to see fluid fall right here. That's from the reservoir. With the cap on, I'm just afraid that you might blow seals or anything, or you might blow a seal. So I take that cap off and just leave it loose. Now you would push these pistons all the way back into the caliper. like most other brake jobs. But these are actually seized. This caliper is just completely toast. So, just pretend that they're pushed all the way into the caliper. You want them nice and flat. I'm going to set that one off to the side because we're not going to reuse it. But even with this caliper that I just bought, you see these pistons are barely pushed out, and that's still too far to get this caliper to fit over the new brake pads. So even on this one, what I'm going to do is use an old brake pad, maybe two, take up some space, and I'm going to push those pistons all the way into the caliper. What I like about this caliper compression tool is it fits right between the dual pistons, if that's what you have. Makes it real easy to press everything together, or press everything in. If you do need one of these compression tools, you will find a link in the description below. And that link will probably have both of these compression tools in that link. You choose whichever one fits you best, or your needs best. You can see the pistons are compressed all the way into the caliper itself now. It should be able to fit right over these pads. And it does, like so. Now these bolts that hold the caliper onto the bracket, these are going to be 32 foot-pounds. You don't want to over tighten these, are real easy to strip out. So these are going to be 14 millimeter, 32 foot-pounds. Again, 14 millimeter, 32 foot-pounds. Now that we have the brakes all put back together, everything's tightened up, hopefully to the proper torque specifications, you know all the parts you need, you know all the tools you need to get the job done. It might be a little confusing with me replacing this caliper on this leaky one or this bad one, so that might throw you off a little bit. So if you have any questions, make sure you feel free to ask anything before you go too far. Now, before you go too far on your actual vehicle, make sure you get in the vehicle, pump the brakes. You're going to pump about 3 to 5 times and your pedals should start getting pretty firm. If it doesn't get firm, you're going to have probably more than just a brake pad and rotor issue going on. You might have something else that you need to take some or put some attention into, such as the brake power booster or master cylinder, something like that. But hopefully you'll get in there, you'll pump it 3 to 5 times and you get a nice firm pedal and get a nice BJ done really quick. So you might be wondering how I get the proper torque specifications for vehicles. And if you have a different vehicle that you're working on, ask away. I might have the proper torque specifications for that vehicle too. But let me show you how I get the torque specifications. Here is the Motor Guide Brake Specification book. I go by this book on every BJ that I do. Oh, there's a few more books I have. This is a 96 to 2021. I think I have everything covering to 78 to 2021 right now. Hopefully they come out with a newer book pretty soon, or I'll hopefully get it. But this is where I get my torque specifications from. Hopefully there'll be a link in the description to buy one of these as well, if you need one. Or like I said, if you have any questions, you want me to look up different brake specs, specifications out of this book, let me know. I'll see if I can help you out. Now that's it. Hopefully you guys liked the video. If you didn't, let me know. If you did, let me know. If this video did help you out, let me know on what kind of vehicle it did help you out on. Before you go all the way out of here, like, subscribe, share, tell everybody about Scotty's Hobbies. Hopefully one of the few videos that are going to be popping up somewhere on the screen might be something else you could use. Check out the video library. I have a ton of other videos on vehicles. I think I have almost 900 videos right now. So make sure you check out my video library. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys on the next hopefully helpful video.